Well, hello, welcome to another devlog, episode 3, I guess. Oh, damage. And as you can see, this is all starting to take some shape here. We have a game. Actually, I'm going to die. There we go. So, we've been having a lot of fun and actually making quite a lot of progress as well. Just very quickly, to follow on from the last devlog where I showed you my spawning function. It was a lot bigger than this, and I just wanted to show off my for loops here being nested in one another. Simple stuff, but when I'm first just trying to get everything working, I suppose the focus is really just on getting it to work. And now I'm starting to tidy things up a little bit, and especially once I started to add variation between the 3 different enemies and how many of those enemies are spawning in, it became clear that for loops were going to make this a lot tidier, and indeed it does. So there's loads of places where we still need to do that, like for example in our weapon script there's some huge lists here where we're spawning in water droplets and things and loads of instances, and I'm sure we could put those into for loops too. So anyway, so that's one thing we're kind of slowly just doing. But the main thing I wanted to show you in today's devlog, and it's something I haven't actually managed to fix yet, but I'm very keen to. It's also going to be in this weapon script here, and it's just because our rattle weapon, particularly once it's upgraded and we deal 2 damage per hit instead of 1, it becomes very, very powerful. But I mean, it's powerful even before it's upgraded, and that's just because it actually has a really, really high DPS, and particularly if you're surrounded, and because it's just mapped to the analog stick, you can sort of do this spinning attack and just stand completely still in the middle of the level, spinning the rattle around, and nothing can actually hit you. And so this is a bit of a problem because the rattle should be the weakest weapon, and at the moment, in order to make the early game really interesting, because the rattle's so powerful, we have quite high spawning numbers. So you can see I've actually simplified all of everything that goes into this spawning function down here can be set up here. So we have different multipliers for the different enemies, and indeed just for how much each wave increases. And so in honing these, what we really need is for the rattle to be a lot weaker, so that then we can slow down reduce the enemy numbers, slow it down, and therefore make the weapons become more important and powerful later on. So it's a bit of a balancing issue we're having because the rattle's just too strong. It's too strong. So my idea is to give the rattle a cooldown after every time it deals damage. I want to potentially to modulate the alpha value a bit, so that it goes a little bit faded out and see through the rattle for say half a second, and then comes back. And in that half a second that it's faded out, it is in cooldown mode and it can't deal damage. And what this will mean is that you'll have to have space to move into with the rattle. You hit them and then you run away, and then you hit and you run, and you hit and you run, rather than standing still and just swinging it around and dealing endless, almost infinite damage. You're gonna need to have some space after you've dealt an attack in order to rebuild the rattle back up, right? I think that'll work, and maybe even we could tie the cooldown time to the upgrade as well, so when it's upgraded it's a little faster. That would be cool. Maybe we just use a timer. There's one way we could do it, or we could just have our own little variable. I think I might try that. I might try and do it all in code rather than with a timer, because they're going to be quite short amounts of time. I think timers aren't so good for very, very short amounts of time, I read somewhere. So let's try that now, and I'll check in with you in a second. Alright, well I've got something working, and it's probably not good. I don't think anything I'm doing is particularly being done the right way, yeah? But like I say, it works. So what I did was, because our player stats is a, whatever you call it, singleton or something, where is it? Auto loads. So this script and scene is always loaded the player's stats, right? So I just put a variable in there called rattle cooldown so that everyone can access it. The enemies, the P, for example, is setting the rattle cooldown to 100 here whenever we hit it. 100 is turned out to be a bit long. I'm going to go with 50. Now, in our rattle state here, we are always checking if rattle cooldown is bigger than 0. And if it is, then we're minusing 1 off of it every physics frame. And then whenever we are about to get the rattle out as a weapon, so if the aim vector is 0, then the collision shape's disabled, but if it's not, this is where we used to just have this one line, but now we're also checking if rattle cooldown is at 0, because if it is at 0, then it can be the right color and the collision shape is not disabled. When it's anything other than 0, the collision shape's disabled and its alpha value is reduced to 0.3, and that works. So let's test it with 50 frames. Now we were at 100 frames. Okay, so yeah, let's test this with 50. So there you go. That's it, and that seems to, yeah. And even if we get it out, even if we put it away and get it back out again, the cooldown is still working. Now, it didn't work on that onion, just saying, because we haven't set it up for the onions yet. But yeah, you can see it's not dealing damage while it's in cooldown mode. And so that just doesn't work anymore. Perfect. Alright, so from just a really small amount of playtesting, we want a visual cue. The player should be able to see how long this cooldown is lasting for and when it's gonna be back. I think that's super important. So we could use the alpha value and like fade it back in, but I don't think that's going to be particularly clear. I would like a circular, like a little graphic really. I'd like some little animation to play, I think, on top of the rattle. So I think we're going to set that up very quickly right now. Where do we want this thing to appear? Do we want it to appear on the rattle? I think maybe we just want it to appear like above the player. Okay, so after thinking about it a bit, we are going to put it into the player's GUI, I think, and we can just put it right here next to the rattle. I think that's the clearest thing to do, I hope. We'll see. We can move it around later very easily, because if it's on the player GUI scene, then we can just pick a spot and move it there really easily. So we want a animated sprite for this, and we'll just rename that to cooldown timer, and then we can grab our image and throw that. Oh no, that's not how we do it. I remember, we go new sprite frames first, we click here, so we can just call it like animate or whatever we want to call our default animation, and then we load it in here. And it's 1 vertical frame and 9 horizontal frames. Select them all, import them all, bang, there we go. So, I mean, that should already work, I think, and animate. If we put it there, we probably want to give it some space, we'll put it there. Alright, well it works. So now, if your stats, so this is in the GUI, yeah, if your stats reach player cooldown 40, oh yeah, and I amended it now so that it's 41 frames, and then obviously the very first frame it's being reduced down to 40, so by the -1 every frame, right? So we're setting it to 41, but we're checking it for 40, and then when it is at 40, the countdown timer becomes visible. We set it to frame 0, we play its animation, and then when the animation is finished, we hide it again. And that works, and the 40 frames matches the time it takes for the animation to actually play, pretty much. It's maybe not completely precise, but it's good enough, I think, and it's pretty clear what's going on, I hope. And we could move that. Maybe that's something for the play testers to tell me that they want that little timer thing moved. Maybe it should just be right on top of the player's head, but that feels like it might be a bit distracting. We could also make a smaller version of it that does actually live inside the rattle, and that might be a better answer. But anyway, you can see it works, and that like this kind of, we can't just keep shaking the rattle around and dealing loads of damage. Now we have to keep our distance from the enemies while fighting them with the rattle. And obviously now what this means is it's become quite clear that the number of enemies we actually have spawning in wave 1 is too many, because that's much too long and difficult for a first wave. Now if you haven't seen this on one of these devlogs as well, here's the shop. But I think we'll have to talk about this more another time, and I also want to make it look prettier. At the moment, it just works. But yeah, a little insight into what's going on as well here, so that's cool. And I think, to be honest, that is where we will leave it for today's devlog. So thanks for watching. As always, be excellent to each other, and I'll see you soon. Safe. Peace.